from the Office of Digital Initiatives and Stewardship at the University of
Innovation Stewardship.
Innovation Stewardship.
So close.
Almost had it. And he's going to tell us about the Open Science Framework.
Great. Well, thank you for coming. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about this thing called the Open Science Framework. So first, a little bit about myself. So my title is Research Data Management Specialist. I work for the libraries, for the Office of Digital. So I screwed it up here.
You don't know where you work.
I don't know where I work, apparently. Office of Digital Innovation and Stewardship. So basically, I'm a data management consultant. I work on topics from like basically working with different researchers across campus, faculty, students, postdocs, on anything data. So finding data, organization, strategies, understanding publisher and funder policies, and doing a lot of workshops and talks. So actually just yesterday we had a part one of a workshop for postdocs on data management, which went very well. So my background is in geography, and before that I was more in the computational hydrogeology area. So I've kind of migrated to the libraries in this kind of data management role. More recently, I'm interested in advocating for open and reproducible research, especially around computational research. Okay, so what is the problem that the Open Science Framework, or OSF for short, is trying to address? Well, we all know that open science is good, and by open, especially open data and open content, I mean things that can be freely used, modified, and shared by anyone for any purpose. And this is just from the opendefinition.org website. Actually making stuff open and useful is easier said than done, as we all know. So there's barriers to this. So there's barriers around, what are the incentives to do this in the first place, which is a whole different issue in itself. But apart from that, when we're collaborating with different people on, working different projects, data and tools can be scattered across platforms, and that's a challenge. People have different ways of working. So because of that, when it comes to collaborating with somebody, those different ways of working have introduced friction into the process, which leads to higher effort to ensure transparency and reproducibility of the work. And then lack of infrastructures and tools that make this process easy is another barrier. And we're all strapped for time. We don't have time really to learn all this stuff. So for these first few, this is the things that the OSF is trying to address. And then for this last one, that's what I'm trying to address. Okay, so the OSF helps with project management and openness, right? But so what? I think given that you're attending this talk, you probably don't need much convincing. But the way I like to present this issue is the issue of openness and reproducibility is around these three different things. So research efficiency, research impact, and reputation. So efficiency, it's pretty obvious that being organized and structured and having everything in one place and that's findable is going to make our work more efficient. And this, by decreasing the friction for collaboration, it'll make our collaborations more efficient, and presumably our happiness would increase, and the happiness of our collaborators would increase as well. For impact, having work that can be easily cited and reused is very beneficial, right? If people can't understand what we're doing, they're not going to be able to reuse it, and they're not going to cite us, they're not going to build on our work. Funders obviously care about impact. So, if we can show that our work is impactful, we can get more money. And efficiency, it ties back to efficiency, and that efficiency can lead to more time being spent on research, which in turn increases impact. Finally, this last one, reputation and trust. So this is kind of a little bit more abstract in that, working openly can conceivably build the reputation of a researcher in that, as a trustworthy and a diligent researcher. And this could influence things not only, you know, again, tying back to impact and funders and money, but also, you know, who collaborates with you and maybe even promotion decisions. Okay, so getting down to it, so what is the OSF really? Well, it's really all of these things. You know, it's a project management tool, collaboration tool, it's a research hub, archive, and all this other stuff. The two that I like to focus on when I'm introducing people to the OSF is the project management and the collaboration aspect of it, because that's really the core of what this platform is trying to do. And I'll talk more about that in a few slides. But before I move on, so even though the OSF, so the Open Science Framework, has open in the name, actually being open is optional. So any project you create on the OSF is going to be private by default, so you're not obligated to share anything if you never want to. So I just want to make that clear. So let me just, before moving on to some of the, before the tour that I want to give you guys, let me just tie back into this research lifecycle, which I'm sure you've seen at some point. So this presents the research lifecycle and how the OSF ties all the tools that we use throughout the lifecycle into one platform. So the OSF is really, so when I mentioned like collaboration and project management tool, I think the first thought that people might have is, you know, oh yeah, it's yet another platform I have to learn, and I have to migrate to this, and I have to change everything that I do. But one of the central things that the OSF is trying to do is not to take people away from the tools that they already use. It tries to bring them all together. This tries to capture which aspects of that research lifecycle the OSF is trying to link together. So, you know, citation management, it links to tools like Mendeley and Zotero. It has a functionality that you can do pre-registrations of studies, and that's more, I guess, clinical and like social science type of work. But you might have come across that in your own work, having to pre-register the methods of a study. The biggest integrations come from you know, the data storage, basically, side of things. So it integrates with, like, you know, Amazon, Box, Dropbox, Google Drive, GitLab, and GitHub, and a bunch more. At the very end, it has integrations with data repositories like Dataverse and Figshare. And when it comes time to publishing, it does have a preprint service, I guess is what you would call it. Not only for generic, not only in a general sense, but also there's disciplinary preprint servers. So there's maybe like 15 of those that are for like psychology or engineering or sciences, where people can upload their preprints. Kind of like along the same veins as archive for physics. One more slide before I get to the tour. I just want to put the OSF into the broader context of what the Center for Open Science does. So the Center for Open Science are the developers of the OSF. So they're a nonprofit, and the mission is to increase openness, integrity, and reproducibility of research. So the OSF is only a small part of what they do. Well, maybe not a small part, but it's a part of what they do. And so what they really do can be categorized into different categories. So you have infrastructure, which the OSF is a part of, preprints, which I mentioned, meetings, registries, and this thing called Share, which you also may have heard of, which is like like an index/search engine of different repositories where you can search for papers and data, and it links them all together in one search. The meta-science side of things, so the Center for Open Science has actually funded a few different studies on examining reproducibility in research. So they funded a study where they tried to reproduce cancer research. So I think they looked at around 100 papers, and they had people, different labs, try to reproduce those results to see what would happen. And so, you know, the results are pretty interesting. A lot of the work they could not reproduce for varying reasons.
I wouldn't use the word interesting.
I think it's interesting in that, well, I mean, these are, you know, it's published work in that you would expect it to be fairly robust, but,
Yeah,
you know,
I think it's sad.
yeah.
Troubling.
I mean, there's varying reasons, and there's definitely debate. You know, there's obviously the reason that maybe the data wasn't necessarily very well shared or curated, but, you know, the pushback from that, the other side would be, you know, maybe the other lab that was trying to reproduce the work didn't necessarily have a full understanding of everything that was done.
Right.
Which kind of gets back to the fact that it wasn't well documented to begin with.
That's right.
And so they're done they're looking at psychology also, and then recently they're starting to look at social science research.
So 100 means 100% reproducible?
100 studies that they try to reproduce.
And how much they could? Sorry, I missed that.
I don't remember the exact percentage, but
Okay.
a significant chunk they could not.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah,
Okay.
pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, and all their work is freely available. It's, if you ever wanted to look at it.
Right, yeah.
The last one is community. So in alignment with their mission, you know, they do a lot of community work. So they have one initiative around open science badges where they have some journals that have signed on board to actually, so whenever somebody submits a paper and they make their materials and their methods available, they get a badge on that paper saying that, you know, like an open data badge. And there's badges for other stuff. Registered reports, kind of gets back to the clinical studies thing that I mentioned, the registrations. To tie that back into the registries, they have a pre-registration challenge where they're giving basically money to people to do pre-registrations. They do a lot of training. You might have heard the top guidelines, which are, stands for transparency, 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 openness, promotion guidelines. Where they have maybe around 500 journals that have signed to these guidelines, basically to promote reproducibility and transparency in published work. So they have some pretty big names. They have Nature, Science, all the AGU journals, a lot of the astronomical journals have signed on to this too. So they're doing a lot of stuff. Okay, so now that's out of the way, let me give you just a quick tour of some of the basic functionality of what the OSF can do. So logging in, if you have a laptop right now, that's fine, but if you don't, that's also fine. So we've partnered with the Center for Open Science to provide OSF for institutions. So the major thing that allows you to do is basically log in with your NetID. If you go to osf.arizona.edu, that's the institutional portal. And if you click sign in to the top right corner, it'll take you to a page where you can select the U of A from the drop down and log in with your NetID. And again, you can connect to all these services.
But other people can access your data outside of U of A, so that you're not limiting the participants to the university only.
That's a good point. Yeah, exactly. So people don't have to be part of the U of A. They don't, if their institution doesn't have OSF institutions, that's fine too. The OSF is open to the public, so they can just sign up for an account like normal.
Right. So if you're collaborating with people at other universities or just private citizens, wherever, they can access your data through this.
Yes.
Yeah.
If I
Exactly.
already have an OSF account and they're logging through U of A account, will they create a separate account or if I need?
So yes, but you can merge your accounts actually.
Oh, okay.
So if you go to the account settings, there'd be an option to add an email, and if you also go to the OSF help pages, it'll take you step by step on how to merge your accounts if you already have them. So this is just what I said. Okay, so let's go to the basics. What does creating a project look like? Once you're in the project dashboard, when you first log in and you click on the OSF home to go to your dashboard, creating a new project is extremely easy. Just clicking that create new project button. And that'll take you to a little pop-up where you can pick, so if you've logged in through your NetID, all your projects will automatically be affiliated with the University of Arizona. And what that means is, it means a couple things. So first, you'll get a little icon on your project with a U of A logo, and your work, if you make it public, will show up in the institutional portal. And that is just, you know, increased visibility of the work and, you know, see what other people at the U of A are doing. But you can toggle that off if you don't want to affiliate the work. Once you create a new project, this is what our project looks like. This is what all projects look like on the OSF. And that's the affiliation that I was mentioning before, this little icon. So the basic structure of a project, it's divided into kind of blocks on the page. So the key functionality is you know, your files, which is your storage. So the OSF has its own built-in storage apart from, so it has its own built-in storage, but like I mentioned, you can also link Box, Google Drive, and all that, and that would show up on this list. And the cool part is that, you know, if your collaborators are using Box, but you like to use Google Drive, you can link them in the same project, and you can actually drag and drop between them straight from the OSF. So that's pretty neat, I think. So this is the file storage. The wiki functionality is probably the other thing that's the most important, and that's kind of, it's like if you've ever used any kind of wiki or like Confluence or something like that, it's the same idea. Basically document things, write anything you want to give context to what the project is. The third most important part is this notion of components. So the OSF, the kind of data model of the OSF is this hierarchical model of projects and components. And that's how you organize stuff and split stuff up into like functional or logical components. And a component, what that is, it's basically just like a mini project. And I'll show you a little bit about that in this next slide. So adding components, again, it's really easy. You just click the Add Component button. So with a component, you can basically organize your project. You know, if you have like files that correspond to, I don't know, a paper A, have them in one component. Maybe there's a different paper B, that's in a different component, but both of these papers are associated with the same project, so you can group them together in this kind of idea of components and projects. You can drag and drop to reorganize stuff here. One thing I do want to point out is, so when I first started using the OSF, when you create components, I found it really confusing that, so each component also has its own storage, its own OSF storage, and you can link independently different Google Drives and different boxes to each component. So one thing that confused me the most was like everything shows up on this list. So here I am at the top level project, and you can see it's this right here. The subcomponents show up also in this list. So, you know, this most interesting component has its own storage. This other component, slides for a presentation, has its own component that's linked to its own Google Drive, and so forth. So I'm just want to make that clear. That's what it is. When you first see it, it might be a little bit confusing, but it's actually pretty straightforward what it's showing. So I mentioned before that everything is private by default. To make it public, it's just clicking one button, and you can toggle that back and forth at any time.
And public's read-only as opposed to write?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, so let me highlight a few of the collaboration-related things. So I mentioned the public-private thing. The contributors part, if you click on this, this is where you can add different collaborators. And like Brian mentioned, they don't have to be at the U of A. They don't have to be even at a university. They can just be anybody in the world. As long as they have an OSF account, which is freely available to anybody, you can add them here. So when you add a collaborator, this is what you get. So you get granular permissions. So whenever you add somebody, you can make them either administrator, give them read-write, or read-only access. And you can make them a bibliographic or non-bibliographic contributor. And what that means is, so if you're a bibliographic contributor, you'll show up in this list. If not, you will not show up in this list. And that's basically, you know, if maybe there's like a project administrator that they might not be on, might not want them on the paper, but you want them to have access to this to be able to manage stuff.
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
This bibliographic contributor has more privileges than others? Is that what you hit on?
No. The only difference between bibliographic and non-bibliographic is that they're gonna show up in this contributors list.
Okay, so, okay, I see.
So you got
Part of
hidden
citation
contributors.
is like,
Yeah, it's for citation
yeah,
purposes.
okay, I see.
Yeah. And
Oh, right, because you can cite you can cite a project.
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And wait, are there DOIs for the projects?
You can generate DOIs for projects as well. I didn't mention that, but I think I will in a few slides. And so if you want to share the link, the project in a read-only form with somebody that doesn't have an OSF account, that doesn't want an OSF account, you can generate view-only links and they're private links you can share. Last thing I'll mention here is that this access control list is on a component basis. So you can actually generate very granular levels of permissions. You know, if you organize your project in such a way that the work is compartmentalized, you can maybe give somebody permission to only access, like, you know, the stuff for paper A and not paper B, for instance. So kind of a little bit more on the storage. So I mentioned the drag and drop functionality. You can drag and drop to upload or to transfer between different storage providers.
So basically for each resource, for example, from Google Drive, I can pick certain folders or certain files from Google Drive to link it here.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you click on the files link up there, it takes you to a more detailed files view. So one cool thing about the OSF is, so if you know, we all know that Google Docs has built-in versioning already. If people don't like to use Google Docs, if you know you like to use Excel or Word, you can upload straight to the OSF storage, and things are automatically versioned. So you can go back to any version at any time.
Is there a limit how many files you can put there?
So the file size limit is 5 gigabytes. There's no hard limit on how much data you can upload.
Okay.
I think they have some soft limits, like if they see you're uploading like, you know, like 50 gigabytes of data or 100 gigabytes, they might like send you an email.
Yeah.
But as long as you tell them like why you need so much space, I think we'll give it to you.
Okay.
So revisions work with Google Docs too, even though they don't show up in this list. If you click on a file, you can actually view the revisions of a Google Doc straight in the OSF as well.
Can you tag those files? I mean,
Tag them.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure if the version number is generated automatically or is it something that you could enter, say that
Oh,
I
I
want
see.
to call it my best version, or you know, my
Right.
version for Doctor Who.
So yes, you can.
Okay, good, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it's not as advanced as like if you use GitHub for version control,
Yeah,
so it's very basic.
yeah, but at least it can separate different versions for me. That
Yes.
I can tell this is a different version from the previous one.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just a little bit on how to actually connect these different things to the OSF. It's very simple. If you just go to the add-ons part, it'll show you everything that you can enable. And then you just click on the one that you want to enable, and you authorize it, so you click on the link and it'll show up, you know, Google, OSF wants to access your Google account, you just give it the permission, and then tell it which folder you want to share. So I mentioned, maybe I didn't mention this. So the osf.arizona.edu, this is the institutional portal. So this is what that looks like. What it is, it's basically just a list of all the projects at U of A, that people have affiliated with the U of A, and they have also made public. And so your project would show up here. And you can see who's been working on what and kind of see what the activity at the U of A is. What I've noticed is actually that people don't tend to make their public projects public. there's, the momentum here at the U of A for using the OSF, I think, is increasing, but people don't necessarily make the projects public. So even though people are using it, they won't show up on this list.
Can you make your project sort of public, but not public your data? Make your data public? I think people most probably concerned with their data if they put lots
Yeah.
of meeting minutes or something like
Yes.
that. They don't want to make it public.
So yes, you can. And the way you do that is by organizing a project with components.
Okay.
So you
yeah,
can make
so
some components
have a public
public.
component and keep all the secrets.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can do that.
that sounds good.
Okay, so let me just quickly go through some of the extra stuff that you can do, and then I'll get to some examples of how people have used the OSF. So a bit more advanced functionality is this notion of forking templates. So if you have a research group that maybe you want people to organize their work in a certain way, so that people are kind of following a standard procedure, you can create a template, and then people can, your students can fork that template and use it. So forking and templates are kind of the similar thing. I won't get into the details of what the differences are, but basically there's a templating functionality. So I mentioned registrations at the beginning. So registration is basically a frozen version of the project. So if you go to the project and click register, it'll take everything that's in the OSF storage and any connected service and make a copy of that into like a read-only archive. And this archive will stay frozen, it's not editable, and you can get DOIs for this, so it's a citable thing.
It's like snapshots?
It's like a snapshot.
You can create multiple ones?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a snapshot, and the registration name, it's kind of weird, but it comes from like the clinical and social science studies where they might want to like pre-register their study and make that a read-only thing.
Yeah,
But it's basically a snapshot.
yeah,
It has analytics, so if your project is public and you want to see what people are looking at, there's an analytics dashboard. Okay, so we've got lots of time to look at some examples. So this is all great and good, but how do you actually manage work using the OSF? So let me go through a couple examples of what people have done. And since I have the computer now, let me just do the live version of these. So the first one I want to highlight is an example of using the OSF for collaborative project management. So this is a research project which is looking at investigating the relationship between people's social environments and their core temperature. I don't know what the purpose is, but this is their project. So they're using the wiki here to describe, this project is hosted by this lab. What is the project? And this project seems to have like a geographic component to it. So it looks like they're collecting data from different regions around the world, and they've used components to separate out the different regions. So the contributors for each region would have right access to their own region, but not the others. And in each subcomponent, people can work however they want.
But Zerman has apparently access to everything.
Yes, he's probably the PI, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So you can see here all the files from each subcomponent, the Poland project, the Portugal project. Each person or each group in these regions is doing different things. And all the information is collected all in one place. And that's really valuable, because if you have this many collaborators, managing like all these different files, blocks, all separately through emails will be a nightmare. You'll lose things, you'll never know where things are.
Mhm.
So having all of this in a central location is extremely useful. And of course, you can make it public so you can show people, if you really want to be truly transparent, you can show people the progress of the work and what's been done.
Hey, Hans on that project.
the other home.
There's another Hans?
So is it possible to create like a structure for those components?
Yes.
That can make it better to sort?
Yes, absolutely. So you can create as many subcomponents, as many layers deep as you want. I wouldn't recommend going more than like 3 layers deep, or else it just gets way too hard to find stuff. But yeah, you can do
Speaking of
that.
which, there's a search function, right?
So
I thought I saw.
there,
Apparently not, I don't see.
there's search, so that's one thing that I think is missing from the OSF. So you can search OSF projects. You can't search for whatever reason within your own OSF project.
Ah,
So that's a good point.
strict navigation system,
Yes.
yeah. But
So-
how can you tell, I mean, what has been updated when you go to this page? Can you see who has done what on which part of the project?
Yeah, so I was just gonna get to that. So there's a recent activity box that tells you who's been doing what, uploading what, and changing what.
Okay.
And as a lab manager, or as a PI, that's extremely useful, because you can see if, people are doing their work. Yeah, so, I mean, if you have a lot of changes, the utility of this, there's no way to search it unfortunately, so you have to go back manually.
So-
That's the downside.
So I currently have my RAs to log their activities on Google Doc. If they change their Google Doc, will this recent activity pick up the change there, saying that this person edited a file from Google?
So it won't pick up changes from linked things.
Oh, okay, so it has to be on the site, okay.
Right.
Which means I have to have something created within this framework. Okay.
That's, well, maybe they change, this is always changing very
Yeah,
quickly, so
yeah.
maybe they have something now that does that, but to my knowledge,
I mean, it's reasonable, it's a reasonable thing.
Yeah, there are timestamps on the document window on the left there.
Right.
And you can sort by modified date. On the right, there's a sort column. So you can sort by name or you can sort by date.
Right, so another question is this list always open? Can you collapse them? I mean, if you have a large project, it's easy to get all those.
yeah, you can collapse them.
And then
There's
sort the
some
rest.
Sort of graphical glitch here. Yeah, it's collapsed.
Right, so leave one open and let's try to sort the modified date. If you do that, well, yeah, perfect. I think that would, yeah,
Okay.
solve some of the problem.
Okay, so that was the first example. The next example is using the OSF to write a transparent and reproducible paper. So here's an example of some researchers from the University of Virginia. You can see they affiliated their work with the UVA, so they have a little logo up here. And they also generated a DOI for this work, so people can cite it. So what this project is showing is they use the OSF to share all the materials for their paper. So in this example, they have a description of the project, they have a license for it, so GNU, and then they're using the wiki to explain what this research is. So their work had some software that they wrote, and they also had some data. So they decided to use components to kind of organize and separate it out.
So would you suggest when, so you might have multiple papers coming out of one project. Would you suggest creating a new project to associate with individual papers? Or is it better to make a component that you make open to represent the papers? Where,
I would
if you want to
suggest,
distribute data and software like this.
I would suggest a project for each paper.
Yeah, okay.
If you have data that's common across papers, so I'm not an editor for this project, but you'll have another button here that says link projects. So if you have like a separate data,
Okay.
you can link that same data to different projects, to different papers. You know
Okay,
what I
that
mean?
makes sense. And, okay, you're gonna talk about tags? Or-
I can mention tags. This is the tags functionality.
And the tags are associated with the project?
Yes.
Okay.
Project source subcomponents.
It says tag, enhanced discoverability, so it has to be a way to search tags, right?
Yeah, if you search but it's a kind of, it's a global search, searching across all OSF
I
projects.
see, I see. So you have to make up very unique tags for the project.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's right. You could do Hong colon cyber infrastructure.
Yeah, like all those Chinese characters together. So I'm
Yeah,
sure it's
right.
unique.
Yeah, yeah, well, you could, nothing's stopping you. So yeah, they organize their data and their code. You can see they've linked their GitHub repository. They uploaded a copy of their paper along with all the figures. They have more software, it seems, so they're using iRods, some Python scripts, and then the actual data. The next one I want to show you guys is using OSF in a classroom teaching environment. So in this application, this looks like it's a kind of like an example that was generated from by people from the CO, Center for Open Science. But they're using it to show how you can use the OSF to organize things like if you're teaching like a class project and you want people to organize things in a certain way, you can create like a template for our students, which they can then clone. So here they have, okay, I want all students in this classroom to organize the work in this way: introduction, materials and methods, analyses, results, discussion, and references, for example. And then everybody would use the same structure. It makes it a lot easier to grade. At the same time, it encourages good data management practices.
How do you clone?
So there's a couple ways to do it. The easiest way is to just fork the project.
Oh, okay.
So anybody that has an OSF account can fork any public project.
Okay.
And what that is you can just fork it, or if you just want the structure without any of the data, you can duplicate it as a template.
So if you do that, you basically made a copy for yourself.
Yes.
Okay.
So here they have the template, and they have all the associated project data that they want students to use. So this is a very useful way, I think, to organize this type of thing.
Yeah, I think it looks like it could. I was thinking of using it in my class too, but although I'm running out of energy and time. But it's not FERPA compliant, but as long as there's no grading components in here, students can collaborate this way.
Right.
On
So-
group projects and all that.
Yeah, since you brought it up, that's a good point. So OSF is not HIPAA compliant or FERPA compliant. So definitely don't put any of that kind of data in here. Even though projects are public, they're not encrypted at rest on the OSF servers.
So-
But we do have Google FERPA compliant space, so maybe we could link the files, but the files themselves don't get extra access because they're in here.
So I don't know the answer to that, and
Yeah.
I'm actually talking to somebody from IRB this afternoon to see what the implications of that would be.
Oh, good. Can you let me know if
Yes.
you can find out?
Because we got this question a couple times already, and
Uh-huh.
so for Box, there's U of A Box, and there's
Yeah.
U of A Box Health, which is a HIPAA compliant version of Box.
Right.
So we're not sure if it's even possible to link the OSF to U of A Box Health, and if it is, what does that mean for the HIPAA compliance?
Right. Okay.
This is sort of a more general question, but I'm realizing I have this, that it applies to the specific thing you're talking about. You said that a lot of people are not using this to actually make their projects publicly available, but they're using it. Is part of the motivation here to create a tool that's so useful that people will just use it anyways, and then if you can talk them into like making it open, then it's just really easy to do that.
Yeah,
So so is that
Exactly.
part of I guess then the point about the search and tags struck me as sort of like potentially a missed opportunity for that strategy, because it seems like you'd want to get people using the tool for their own purposes.
Mhm.
So you'd want to so I'm going to tag my own projects so I can search and find stuff in my project, and then if I make it open, now you've got all the tags in place so that other people can get access to it.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it's, you know, I haven't been involved with it. So the OSF has been around for maybe like 4 years. My guess is that at the beginning, they probably weren't thinking of making things private or enabling privacy. I'm guessing that came a little bit later, so that the infrastructure was already there to lost my train of thought. So basically, you know, they were thinking of it from the beginning as a public-facing thing, where people would make things public, and then maybe later on they added to the ability to make it private. So that was built into it. That's my guess. But you're right. It's definitely one thing that they should consider now.
So where's the button for a wish list?
Well, GitHub
GitHub.
issues.
It's on GitHub?
So this is an open source project. Anybody can
Oh, okay.
can run their own OSF.
So I was to make a suggestion, sort of vaguely related to what Don was saying, but certainly related to Hong and concerning the tags. I mean, the projects are unique, right? So each project establishes a namespace. So that you can use any tags you like, but you don't have to think of fancy tags of your own, because they're tags within a namespace. And what the tag search function should do, should be able to search within a namespace and search across namespaces.
Yeah, sure. I totally agree. And that's one big weakness right now of the OSF, is right now it just searches the global namespace.
So we should go into GitHub and make our.
But if but I'm saying, you know, you don't want to be thinking, I'll create some fancy tags of my own. You just
No,
want to
it would
use,
be better if.
you just want to use perfectly ordinary tags.
Yeah.
So if somebody says, oh, I'm interested in Gene or something like that, Gene, you know, it goes right across namespaces or within a namespace. That's
Yeah.
what you want to do.
Totally,
Yeah.
100% with you there.
Another observation, I feel like this framework is very good at organizing your data and associate that data to different components. It's very, very useful. But what is missing, maybe you have not shown us, I don't know, is an approach to schedule your activities, like Trello, that you have those.
Yeah, it's
Does
not.
it have? No.
No.
It's not in their plan to make something?
I don't think
To
so.
support that, okay.
Yeah,
So it's
or
basically-
Slack.
Yeah, it's basically sharing make the data, it's like a global file system for your project
Exactly.
components.
So, I mean, that would be more, you know, more of like, instead of embedded functionality, it'd fit more like as a plugin or as an extension to it,
Yeah.
kind of like in that circle that I showed with all the
Yeah.
things around it.
Right,
You know, they specifically have told me that they are not trying to integrate all this functionality into the OSF, but
Mhm.
just trying to link to tools that people already use.
right.
I don't know if
Even
Trello
I
has
think the
APIs,
linking
but
part, so the current file system linking part won't support something like Trello. It does not
no.
present the visualization that allows you to schedule your work easily.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if you use Trello, there's nothing stopping you from inserting a link into the wiki and just,
right.
here's a
right,
Trello link, you
right.
go there.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah. It's just, it's feel much better if we have a
Okay.
picture here, right, showing that this group is doing great and this group has not produced anything.
Yeah.
Any other questions so far?
But it
Just,
is, I think it's going to be very, very helpful. I'm trying to think how to use this in a classroom.
Yeah, well, the other place to use it is department administration.
Yeah.
Because we have files on the shared drive. I've been here for 8 years and I still can't find them.
Right, yes.
Mhm.
That would have to make it private.
Right,
Private,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just a couple more examples. Here's an example of using the OSF to organize like a research community. So this is the OSF home for a project called the Software Preservation Network. So they're looking at, basically, it's this umbrella organization for looking at researching different aspects of software preservation, community outreach, communities of practice. And so we've used the OSF to organize this community where we have subcomponents for, we have working groups, we have, founding documents, presentations, meetings. So this is actually a pretty good example of like using the OSF for like a comprehensive organizational structure. So if you drill down into working groups, you'll see there's more subcomponents. So there's maybe like 7 or 8 different working groups, each doing their own thing. So you can see these particular working groups have decided to keep their project private. The only reason I can see this project right now is because I'm logged in and I'm part of this. But if you go into drill down even more, each working group then can have their own way of doing things, right? You're not imposing a certain work method. So in this working group, I'm just using the wiki for, just to show news and some of the things that we've been doing, and then just outline the scope of the working group, and then publish a couple reports. And each working group is doing their own thing. So these guys actually don't have any subcomponents, they just have one document, it seems.
Slackers.
Okay.
So I see there is a function called create DOI.
Yeah.
Does that mean, what I heard earlier is once you register your project, make a snapshot, you got a DOI attached.
Yeah.
Does that link, if you click on create DOI, it will automatically register your?
It won't register it. So you can create DOIs when you register,
Mhm.
but I think maybe like last year, they also added the functionality to create DOIs for active projects.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure what the usefulness of
Motivation.
that is, because
So
your
the
project
material can change?
it's changing.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to give a citation for the projects in general, maybe that would be a useful thing, instead of like, yeah.
So I wouldn't call it, well, it's an identifier, but just not, it's persistent, but the thing it points to is not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So do we know, I mean, if we're using DOI for these cases, I mean, how many people would use that kind of DOI to cite a moving document or moving project?
Yeah, I don't, you would think a journal wouldn't accept it.
I don't, why?
'Cause you could-
I kinda don't think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's mutable.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
I
content
mean,
is,
what's the point?
Yeah.
yeah. Well, people put, well,
I
it
mean, it
becomes
must-
very much like a URL.
Yeah.
Because it can change and move and all that, yeah.
But if we think of DOI as for the purpose of citation most of times, right?
Yeah, right, and, right, they shouldn't be doing that. Or they could take a snapshot. It would make sense if you
Yeah.
versioned and branched
Right,
and
right.
froze the branch and made a DOI for a frozen copy.
Yep.
But it doesn't make sense this way. Yeah.
I agree. But it's there, if people want to use it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last example I want to show you is using the OSF to organize a workshop, or a conference even. Actually, I probably should have shown the Astrolabe one, but I already had the screenshot for this one. So this is an example of where this workshop used the OSF to organize themselves. So they have, the wiki just explains what the workshop is, and then they used subcomponents to organize, like, the presentation recordings, speaker slides, agendas, notes, and schedules. And all that is, if you wanted to say like have shared notes, or if you wanted the speakers to upload their own presentations, you could add them as a contributor to that component. Their name would appear as contributors, and their slides would then be part of that record of the workshop.
Yeah, so we just ran an Astrolabe workshop at the Biosphere, and we used this and we created wikis for each of the breakout groups to keep notes about what their priorities and decisions and stuff were. So then we have a record.
Cool.
Yep.
use this, can it help you to automatically generate a schedule or something?
Not automatically. I can help you generate the schedule, but not automatically.
Okay. You have the information there, yeah.
Yeah, totally. So, so this is using the OSF to organize like the logistics of the workshop or conference. There's another functionality related to meetings that I just want to quickly show you since we have a couple minutes, and that is OSF meetings. So OSF meetings is kind of like a very much simpler version of this. And all that is basically, well, let's look at an example here. Society for Personality and Social Psychology, 2014. So what that is just a page where it's just a list of all the presentations that have been uploaded for that conference. You can see what category, if it's a poster or a talk, the author, and how many downloads. The cool part about this is that the OSF for meetings is that even if it's very extremely easy for people to upload their stuff, so they don't even need an OSF account. All you do is send them an email that says, reply to this email with the title of your presentation as a subject and attach your PowerPoint or PDF. And just replying to that email would automatically upload their file to this list and create an OSF account for them. So it's extremely easy. It's very straightforward, and you can see how many people have downloaded, and it's just a quick list of all the presentations. And you can then link from the main OSF organizational page to this, or vice versa. And I think that was the last thing.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about the preprints? What kind of preprints does OSF accept?
Oh, yeah.
I saw the function there.
Yeah. Let me do this one, then.
Yeah.
So is it like archive?
It's like archive.
Okay.
So preprints. So I'm guessing everybody in this room knows what a preprint is, so I won't go into that. So they have a general preprint server where you can upload preprints. They also have a lot of discipline-specific preprint servers that are organized around different communities such as library information, law, paleo, psychology, social archives, or social science. And really what it is kind of just like a different front end to an OSF project. So when you upload a preprint, it creates an OSF project in the background and presents it in a very preprint-like way. And I can show you a couple examples of that. The difference between archive and OSF preprints is that in OSF preprints, you can actually, because it's an OSF project, you can upload your code, your data, all at the same time with the preprint, and it'll show up so you have the preprint preview, and right below is a little box that shows, this is the data, these are the figures, this is the code associated with this preprint.
So when is our institutional archive going to be linked?
That's a good question. Well, so I mentioned Share in one of the slides, which is like an index, a search engine that searches across all these different repositories. Our institutional repository is linked to Share.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Let me just show you a quick example of a preprint. So let's search. There's a really good example of a preprint which I don't have right now, which actually has data and code, but let's just pick one at random. Engineering. Oh, this is actually in Search's archive as well. So let's just search engineering archive. So it's more of a traditional presentation of what you would expect a preprint to look like. And there should be a preview that shows up here, if it ever does.
Maybe they didn't upload.
It has abstract already there.
I'm not sure what's going on with that one. These previews aren't working right now. is waiting for, I don't know if OSF done it. Anyway, so the PDF preview would show up right here. You get a special preprint DOI.
And this DOI is generated by OSF?
Yes. And then once the actual paper is published, you can link the real DOI to this.
It looks like this OSF preprint links to a variety of other preprints service, right?
Yeah.
So, is that how this is primarily used, or can I upload my own preprints? I mean, if I have a project here, right?
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
So like, most of these are service from OSF preprints. So like, AgriChive, BITS, BioArchive, well, maybe not BioArchive, Earth Archive, all these are OSF preprints.
Okay.
Archive is obviously not, but you can still search it. So yeah, definitely, if you want to create a preprint, OSF preprints,
Yeah, Archive,
at preprint.
as I remember, doesn't have a good method to add data and software and stuff. So it's better, OSF preprint though does support that, so it might be, has a certain advantage over Archive.
Right, so if you wanted to add something to the Library Information Scholarship preprint server, you just click on theirs and just click Add Preprint, and it'll add it to that specific disciplinary preprint server.
Oh, I see. So then it'll be discoverable for anyone searching just that Archive.
Exactly, so then if you go, there's even subcategories here, it looks like, Library Information Science. Yeah, there's a few different things here. Here's an example that has data associated with it. So I don't know, the preview's still not working, but like I said, all these preprints are actually OSF projects in the background. So you can have all the data associated with it. And you can actually has a link to visit the actual project. So this project is created automatically when you create a preprint. But yeah, so this is what their preprint thing looks like. Cool, so I think that's time. If you have any other questions, feel free to email me. Actually, one more thing before you leave. I want to highlight some of the upcoming events. So we will be having a more detailed, in-depth, hands-on workshop on the OSF. That'll be March 30th, and that's open to all of campus. So there's an RSVP link here, and if you go to our website, you can see that as well. We'll probably be sending out something, you'll hear from like one of our liaisons for the ad for this, but just making you aware that this is going to happen on March 30th. There's also part 2 of data curation for postdocs will be on March 29th. So even though it's targeted at postdocs, it's actually open to grad students and faculty as well. And the registration link is there. So that is it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fernando.
Thank you.
Thank you.